Welcome to the best gambling show on the internet. This is the home of the Money Pick off-season edition. Let's get into it. I'll give you your introduction in a second, but we're going to go with the NFC over-under win totals. And I do want to say there is going to be some variance in some of the spreads, the win totals Vegas throws at you. I am just going with the mean average I've seen over 4 or 5 books. I'll clarify the discrepancies. There's going to be 2 teams where there are, but let's get this money. Great to see you, Mike. Great to be back. Excited for this year. And this is the most we can get, man, because we're at May 28th and we're about to hit that slog. You guys know once you get to like mid-June, it's dead until training camp. So we're pretty much there.
Yeah, bro, we go from like the high of the draft to now nothing for like 3 months. So it's definitely the worst part of the season or worst part of the year if you're a football fan. So I'm excited to be doing this video with you and the AFC video in the coming days. I think this is gonna be really fun, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, man, and all we get during these months is Dove Kleinman just rolling out the worst tweets imaginable to make you mad. So let's get to it. Let's start NFC West. We got people live. I'm excited about that. So NFC West. Let's start with the Cardinals. Over under 8.5 wins. I'm going to go over, Mike, and I'm going to tell you why. I feel like the best move of the offseason was the Cardinals getting Josh Sweat. And I know it's in vogue to talk about him now after the playoffs, but during the year last year, we were talking about him, and the sack numbers weren't impressive, but the pressures are. And the big reason why I'm going over here is John Gannon. I mean, we got questions about the offense. We'll get to it. But if you look at how this Cardinals defense has performed since John Gannon got there, they've been pretty good, man. And there were times last year where they were a top 10 unit. And this is what's scary about it. They had bottom third talent in the league on defense. When have they ever had a pass rusher? When have they ever had any bodies he could circulate through in a rotation on the D line? I think this is the best defense he's had by far. I think they'll be able to get a pass rush. And I'm still worried about the secondary. And I'll just get to the offense real quick. The reason why this isn't a money pick, obviously, is because the offense. They're so inconsistent. And one thing I didn't want to go into, but I have to go into it, is we can focus on Kyler Murray and his lack of consistency. And that's real. It's a huge issue. But I don't know about you, man, but when I watch this Cardinals offense, I just see a huge lack of explosion, a lack of speed even. Like, I get excited when I see Dortch get the ball. And that's how confined everything is. And maybe it's Marvin Harrison. I'm not saying Marvin Harrison is a bust, but, man, that was kind of a disappointment when we look at Malik Neighbors. And he never got in the rhythm with Kyler Murray. So, overall, man, the big question is this offense. But I think the defense is going to be a top 10 unit. I'm going over.
Yeah, bro, you nailed it right in the head for me. I also have it going over at 9-8. This was a team, like, in the second half of the year, very much controlled their own destiny around week 12, week 13-ish. You know, they were very much in the mix to win that NFC West and kind of just choked it away. But this offseason, I love their defensive additions. You get Josh Sweat in the room, and then you have a phenomenal draft. I mean, Walter Nolan is going to help that run defense a ton. You steal Will Johnson in the second round. I think their defense is going to be much improved this year compared to what we've seen. Like you mentioned, though, the big concern is still that offense. Kyler Murray is one of the most inconsistent quarterbacks in the NFL. One day he can be great, and then the next day he can be barely passable. Ultimately, I think it will be enough to push it over, but this isn't one that I would go betting the house on because of Kyler Murray.
And that's where we're at. And look at how reliant they were last year on James Conner. Like, if he didn't have a big game, that offense was just completely anemic and died. Mm-hmm.
Look, you want to add to your point, like, and granted, this is my own team, but Watch the game against the Panthers. I guarantee you, if James Conner does not get hurt in that game, they beat us and maybe make the playoffs. The second he got hurt, that offense got completely out of whack, and that's a perfect, example of your point right there.
So, I mean, and also still questions about the offensive line as well, but obviously they were able to run the ball when James Conner was in there. So if they're able to do that, I think they should go over. But like you said, it's 9 wins. I don't see them going crazy. It's because of Kyler Murray, man. It really is. But also, before we go on, I don't want to dwell on the Cardinals too much. But man, Marvin Harrison was a huge disappointment last year.
Agreed. Yeah, I think he'll be better this year. He has a ton of talent. But let's move on. We have 15 other teams to get to here.
Okay, we got the Rams over under 9.5. I'm going to go over, but this isn't the slam dunk alley-oop that I thought it would be. I'm good, but the reason why I'm going over isn't because of Matt Stafford. It's not them getting Devontae Adams. Although I am worried about this offensive line. I think that's one thing I kind of wanted your opinion on going into this. But it's because I think this defense is going to take massive strides. I just think this defensive line is going to be a top 5 unit in the league. And we saw last year, man, and I know everyone was picking on their secondary, and I didn't see that on film. I know there was a bunch of no names, a bunch of young players back there. But with that defensive line, I felt like they're pretty fucking good and even dominant at times, and they saved the Rams in games. But this is why I'm going back to why this isn't the alley-oop. I'm worried about this Rams offense, man. And we were both talking the other day, and we both agree Cooper Kupp is overrated and he was a liability last year, but that doesn't really give any excuses for some of the stuff we saw from this offense. They lacked rhythm. When they were able to run the ball, yeah, man, the offense did look better, but it never looked dominant. You just kept waiting for this offense to be dominant. When they finally got healthy around week 5, week 6, we were like, okay, they're coming now. We saw what they did against the Vikings, and then it just never materialized, man. And that's my issue with it. I do think something's rotten with this offense. And even if you look at the beginning of the year, the first 5 games, I felt like Matt Stafford was playing the best quarterback in the league in those first 5 games. And then as the team got healthy and as things started developing, as that young defensive line started to blossom, Stafford's play really fell off. And that's the issue here. That's why it's not a slam dunk money pit.
Yeah, I have it going over as well. I'll keep it simpler. The reason I have it going over is just because of Sean McVay. I trust him to get winning records at this point. I trust him to do enough of the talent he has on this roster to win. Concerns about this, like you said, Matthew Stafford is damn near 40 now?
Yeah.
He's getting up there, and he was falling off.
Just to add some perspective, I think he's 38 and a half, 39.
Yeah.
And that's worrisome, especially that's a real 39. That's like a 1980s NFL 39, 38, whatever it is. Some of the hits this man has taken during his career, we didn't even see in the fucking 80s, man.
Right. Now, here's what I will say as a part of the argument for going over. The NFC West as a whole, their opponents for this year is the NFC South and the AFC South. 2 of the worst divisions in football by a mile. And I'm going to talk about this with another team we have in this division as well in a second. But with that week's schedule alone, that is enough of a motivating factor to make me push it over. So not a ton of science here. Another one I wouldn't go betting, but I definitely like the over.
Agree, and I think the defense takes a step up this year. I actually really think was one of the underrated defenses last year. Next one. We got the Seahawks at 8.5. Money. I'm going under. Now, this is one of the ones I need to clarify because some books have it 8.5, some books have it 7.5, but there's big payout discrepancies either way. But if you can get one that says 7.5, I feel comfortable going under 7.5 as well, but I feel comfortable with both numbers. And this is one of the teams, Mike, that I was shocked the way Vegas has rated. because always when you go in, get ready for a season and prepare to bat, I always look at where Vegas is power ranking these teams, and I try to find discrepancies. And I think the biggest discrepancy I have with them, besides for how they're rating the Dolphins, although they're coming along on that, I think the biggest discrepancy I have with their power rankings is the Seattle Seahawks. And you were right about Sam Darnold absolutely killing it with the Vikings last year. You called that early on. But I think this is going to be an absolute disaster. I have big questions about McDonald, the coach. Although he did correct that around week 8, week 9, we finally started to see the defense play better. But man, I don't think this defense is dominant at all. I think they have issues there. But the main issues for me is this offensive line. I think this offensive line is going to get absolutely pulverized. They got a good left tackle. Outside of that, what do we have? 3-4 questions on the offensive line, and I'm not sure that's going to be answered. And I'm sure you're going to talk about Sam Darnold and the things he needs, but you want to know one thing he also needs? He needs a fucking wide receiver, and I just think you take players like DK Metcalf off of a roster. I think that's a big issue, and I don't think that's something you can cover up. Also, getting back to the offensive line, I know, man, Geno Smith was absolutely tragic in the red zone last year. It was terrible. But I do feel like people are undercounting Geno Smith. I know it's not saying a lot, but listen, man, the last 4 or 5 years, he's been a top 15 quarterback. Maybe even top 9.
And listen, like, there was a good contingent of NFL fans who were putting Geno Smith in the MVP conversation the first month or so of the season. So that should tell you the level he was playing at. Like you said, easily a top 10, 15 quarterback on last year overall. And adding to your point about Sam Darnold, look, we've been saying for a while now that he is a quarterback who, above all else, needs good protection. If you don't give him that, you don't know what you're going to get with him. And now you put him in a division that maybe has some of the best pass rushing teams in the NFL. You have the Rams, who have Verse, and their guy whose name I can't remember right now, who are both who are both pass rushing studs. You have the 49ers with Saleh back there. That's a team that can get after the quarterback. And then you have the Cardinals, who we just talked about, who add Josh Sweat and have Jonathan Gannon, who is a coach who is known for blitzing bad quarterbacks. So I think this is an easy under, just like you said. I also have it going under. I have them getting about 5-6 wins. I actually think McDonald is a pretty decent coach. I just really disagree with the off-season strategy here for getting this team right. That's my problem with it. This is not the way I would have approached the offense at all.
It's sending mixed messages, and we know they can get out of the Sam Darnold contract. It's not going to be like they're just with him for like 3-4 years, or they have to eat it this year like the Falcons with Kirk Cousins. We understand that. We're not believing the stuff the agents put out there. But still, like you said, I do question the team-building aspect, and I do wonder moving DK Metcalf out there. But if you're going rebuild, go rebuild. But like you said, this is sending an awful lot of mixed messages. And Sam Darnold's not going to have a run game with the Seahawks. I would be shocked if they were able to run it, Mike. I would be very shocked. And then also, like you said, I just think this division, I just think this division, that's like 6 tough games against 6 tough defenses. And I think the Cardinals defense line, like we said earlier, should be good, should be active. So yeah, man, I'm getting against the Seahawks. Also, another thing I want to just bring to the table, and maybe the stat guys can come to my defense on this. I don't think anyone fears going into Seattle. I don't think it's the home field advantage, the flex people think it is. Like, for instance, like when the Packers went in there and whipped their ass with the Seahawks season on the line, I just feel like Vikings whipped their ass, and the Vikings played just completely abject for 2 quarters of that game. Just a lot of teams just go in there and whip their ass, and it's nothing special, and that's where I'm at on this home field. I do think it's one of the most overrated things. I don't think Vegas is overrating it. Like, I think Vegas, the home field advantage, for the strongest home field advantage for them is unironically Miami at 1:00. But yeah, man, I do want to just throw some water on those Seahawks flames they're like they act like it's some sort of treacherous place to go into. No one gives a shit anymore going in.
No. Yeah, and I don't think the fan base is the same as it used to be. Hey, real quick, technical question. Am I lagging in and out? Is my connection good?
Mike, it's going good so far. So
okay, all right, cool. Well, let's hope it stays that way.
It's not going to be a repeat of last year.
Yeah, let's hope not. Doing good so far. But yeah, that's my favorite bet of the division right there. Definitely Seahawks under.
Yeah, man. What's up, Fredo? What's up, Action Jackson? What's up, Campbell? What's up, DJ? Great to see everyone. San Fran over under 10.5. I'm going to go under. Now, I know when I did the early Vegas spread picks, that was the money pick when they were plus 1.5 on the road to Seattle. And I'm not necessarily negative on San Fran. The schedule is actually very easy when I walk through it. I also think matchup wise, the way the games are layered also work in San Fran's advantage. And also you already mentioned Bob Saleh. I just think that's going to give a much needed rejuvenation to this defense. And then we also have to remember the 49ers are in a weird phase. They are kind of doing like not a rebuild, but a fast rebuild, trying to get some young blood in there. Like we get it. We understand they're not gunning for it this year, but I think this is a 10-win team, and I don't have much to add, except they were very, very unlucky last year with the injuries. I guess my main concern, other than the secondary and other than the overall team speed on defense, my biggest concern is this offensive line. I mean, Mike, like Trent Williams is an absolute god, and I've enjoyed watching him. It's just, isn't he kind of getting to the point where he's like Tyron Smith and where he's like one of those left tackles where, yeah, like it's great to have him, but you're only going to have him 12, 13 games. And how much can you really rely on him? And then the rest of the offensive line is questionable and touch and go at best, although a Shanahan scheme will help with that. Although, last year I did get a little bit worried, but Ayuk being back, Jennings emerging, this offense is going to be a train. Okay, it's going to be a top 10 offensive unit, and if this defense is a little bit better than last year, 10 wins easy. I'm going under, but it's a really fucking soft under from me.
The other thing too that scares me is I don't think this receiving core is the force that it used to be.
No, okay. Sorry to cut you off. I'll let you have your take. But don't you think just kind of like getting rid of Deebo Samuel is kind of addition by subtraction at this point?
Yeah, he was getting up there, but I mean, he's still a receiver that teams fear, and I think a guy you fear with the ball in his hands, even though he's not as good as he used to be. The good thing you still have going for you is Kyle Shanahan is going to scheme guys open like it's cotton candy. So that's what you've going for you. I actually had this going over. When I did my schedule prediction for them, I had them rounding out to 12 wins, which I know sounds very high, but dude, this schedule is so easy. Like, this is a cakewalk. This is what happens when you have a bad year and finish last in the division. And I'll just name off some games to start their year. They start at Seattle, which I think we both agree is a win. They go to New Orleans. They play the Cardinals at home. They got the Jaguars. That's 4 games right there that they will be favored in without question, in my opinion. And they'll probably win all 4. That's just like epitome of it. I have it going. I understand I don't feel too confident.
Michael, man, you lagged out there. You lagged out. Okay, I think we're without Mike. So
am I back? Am I back? You got me?
I believe you're back. You're back now.
We've abandoned. I told you the lag was gonna get me. Okay, but anyway, like I was saying, this schedule is a cakewalk in my opinion. You start Seahawks, Saints, Cardinals, Jaguars. That's gonna be 4 wins. I know 12 is high, and I think that will be like an inflated win total, so to say. But I think it will be enough to push this over, even though I do kind of agree that the 49ers are on the decline.
No, but Mike, it's a Shanahan team, and they had tons of injuries to key talent last year. So, I mean, I know there was teams with injuries that overshadowed them, but they had some serious injuries last year. They have some serious age, but when you have a player like Bosa get hurt, there's when you have Ayuk missed the whole season. I mean, there's only so much salary cap and dogs to go around on the NFL.
And both your running backs get hurt as well. Like it's hard to get around that.
No, but Mike, and thanks for mentioning the beginning of that schedule, because like I said, the way that also like the teams are obviously the teams. We already knew that going into the opponents they're going to be facing. But the way it's layered, that's like a really soft landing. And they're going to be healthy those games unless something catastrophic happens. So they're going to run a train like they're going to go 5-1, 6-1. So that's why I just think they're going to go 10 wins because I'm nervous about the injuries. But
this one I have going over just because of the schedule. Like there's not a ton of science here. If you want to bet it, fine. But like I don't think it's the wisest bet in the world. I will say there are teams later who we're going to talk about who have brutal schedules, cough, cough, Giants. And even though I think their team got better, I think their record is going to be worse. So just a warning for that later.
For sure. Now, let's get to the NFC North. We already had some people in the chat talking about this team. Let's start with the Bears. Over under 8.5. I got to say, I didn't fall for the Bears stuff last year. Although I did think they would actually be a pretty decent team, but I didn't fall for it. But I'm falling for it this year. I'm going over the 8.5. Let's just leave Caleb Williams to one side because I'm sure we can talk a little bit about that. But I'm going over. I think it's a pretty good defense. I like what's going on there. I have no real complaints about the defense. But you add Ben Johnson. And I've been waiting for him to be a head coach in this league for the last 2.5, 3 years. That's where I've been at. And now we finally get our wish, and this team is an absolute train on offense. Like the moves they made on offensive line, I absolutely loved it. They went from being a bottom third offensive line to being a top 10 offensive line in my book. Now, of course, we have to see how that mesh. We have to see what comes together. But I just think them being able to run the ball makes things really easy for Caleb Williams. I get that it's a tough schedule, and I get Caleb Williams could be very, very poor. And Caleb Williams, listen, man, there's a lot of scapegoats for him last year.
Yeah. And
I still haven't really heard anyone give him much criticism. I really haven't. I really haven't. Like, we're getting a lot of excuses out there. Like, no one taught him how to watch film, and we're getting Eberflus, and obviously Eberflus was a disaster near the end, especially those last 3-4 weeks. He's just completely went on tilt and went off the rails. So, like, yeah, we get him as an excuse. But the reason why this over isn't a money pick is because when DJ Moore started to like quit on routes around that Arizona week, around like when we started hearing the anonymous sources saying maybe Badgett needs to get in here, according to the guys in the locker room. If that is true, I don't know, but I've never seen DJ Moore quit on a route before. He's always kind of been a high-effort guy. Remember when he jogged off in the middle of the play as Caleb Williams starts running, scrambling without any purpose? Like, we saw that a lot last year. And I do feel like that offensive line last year was, man, they were bad. They were poor. The scheming was poor. Okay, I get it. But they took a lot of blame for a guy who held on to the ball way too long. And I do want to double back on that, Mike, because when me and you were talking, remember during preseason when he beat up the third and fourth string Cincinnati Bengals, everyone was saying, wow, that's a Pat Mahomes throw. We don't see that too much, right? And like they had the ones the whole first half against UPS drivers on the other side. And then you just said, like, Lawson, like, firstly, like, he was inaccurate, which obviously you can see just by the stat line. But also, we said the same thing. He's holding the ball too fucking long.
Yeah, so, and for what's worth, too, I don't know how much an achievement it would have been if he had beaten up on the Bengals' first stringers, let alone their third stringers. We'll talk about them in another video. But yeah, one of One of my favorite reports that I saw recently come out this offseason is how one of the coaching points that Caleb Williams is getting is how he needs to improve his mannerisms on the sideline, how fast he gets up after a hit, how he looks when he's on the bench, like little things like that. So that was a great report I saw yesterday. I have it going over as well. One of my hot takes for the year is that I think every team in the NFC North finishes with more than 9 wins. I'm not sure if any division has ever done that. But another thing that I really liked that you didn't touch on, they hired Dennis Allen as their defensive coordinator. And Dennis Allen is, I mean, I know he gets a lot of hate because of what happened with the Saints last year, but there was a good 4 or 5 year period where his defense was just running through the NFC South like it was nothing. I mean, I don't know if any coach has owned Tom Brady like Dennis Allen did for that 3 years he was in the NFC South. I mean, he is a stud. I don't even care what talent they have on that defense. He's going to do great work with them, and I think it's going to push him over 9 wins.
Agree. Also, Dennis Allen gets unnecessary hate. Okay.
Yeah, look, I'm the biggest Saints hater there is, but that team was beat up and old. You give him pieces, and he can make things work. And I love this marriage between him and Ben Johnson, and I think that defense is going to be a much improved unit.
It's like taking a wooden raft out to the middle of the ocean and getting mad when a fucking tsunami comes and eventually blows it to pieces. Yeah. It was inevitable.
It's like going out with floaties and like someone puts a hole in it. Like that's what you did.
Yeah, I had a good paint job. The season started good and everyone got excited. And I get it. Like people are reactionary. But yeah, I just feel like it's really good coaching staff, man. Yeah. And we saw that in the same division with Flores and O'Connell. When you got 2 head coach caliber guys, it makes a huge fucking difference. I mean, and like you said, regardless of talent, although I do like to build the Bears' talent on defense, regardless of talent, you do get a new defensive coordinator bound. Something we didn't see the Packers get last year. Let's get to the Packers. Over under 9.5. I'm going under. And this
I could not care. You have it going under, and you feel good about this?
For the Packers, 9.5.
I mean, okay. No, yeah. I have no opinion on this whatsoever. Like, I don't know what to do with the Packers. I'll be honest.
Yeah, because but I think that sums up. I think that sums up where we're at with the Packers. What is the plan? Doesn't this ship feel a little bit stagnated? It's stuck in the mud and it's not getting out to sea. It's not really going. And we can talk about Jordan Love, but also I do want to make some excuses for him. I mean, we even saw LaFleur. They've invested a lot of time, energy, draft capital in the offensive line. And the offensive line, that never took off. I mean, they're good at run blocking, but at times. And I feel like this young receiving core isn't going to blossom and be what they thought it was. And they keep going into every year, and they might even be the youngest team on paper again this year. I'm not sure. And they keep going into every year being the youngest team, but none of these guys are developing. No one's taking the next step. And they were extremely reliant on Josh Jacobs last year. They did not have many drives unless Josh Jacobs was absolutely going ham. And I just don't think that's good enough, especially when you're playing these 3 other teams 6 times in a year before we even get onto the extra schedule. On the other side, Joe Barry's out. This defense is going to take a step, right? Naturally, right? We thought they would get more pressure. They would be more aggressive. Maybe Rashawn Gary would finally be the star. He should have been 2-3 years ago. No, man, it didn't really take off. They still can't cover anyone. The secondary is extremely reliant on Jair Alexander, whether it be his interest, whether it be his health. You add in Xavier McKinney, and I know that looked great on paper, and Xavier McKinney is a phenomenal player, by the way, Mike. But you add that to the mix, and did it really even move the needle on defense? Can they really cover anyone? And my answer is no. So I feel like you have an average offense and an average defense when you're going to go through an absolute gauntlet, an absolute tsunami of teams that are getting better by the minute. And I don't think the Packers are. And I don't think they have I just don't think they have the difference makers.
Yeah.
And that's
what the heck?
Yeah, my cat. Okay, go on.
What's up, buddy? Yeah. Again, I have no idea what to do with this team. Like I said, I think they're kind of entering that stage where they are literally and figuratively paying for the Jordan Love contract. And I think that kind of sums up what you said. Like, he's a guy who's very inconsistent. Probably the way I heard it best is he is consistently the most inconsistent quarterback in football. And I think that's a great way to sum it up. This isn't one I'm touching. I get if you're going to have him as like the odd man out in the NFC North. But again, like I don't have a strong lean here either way. I don't know about you, but like yeah.
But yeah, it's not the strongest lean in the world. Like I don't think there's going to be one I'm posting on Patreon once training camp starts, but it's one I'm seriously considering. And thank you for the super chat, Zamora. Let me just answer this. Lawson, I want to go all in this year. How much do you suggest I should save up money-wise before the season starts? Also, did you ever start a Discord? Yes, Discord executive tier on Patreon, Zamora. And also, well, it depends how much you want to save up. I would say, Zamora, I don't know your financial situation. You can send me a message and maybe I can help you better out. But I would try to start with like $2,000, $3,000. But that's just me not knowing your finances or your life situation. I saw you were talking about solar panels. So I don't know what that entails. So, all right, I'll try to answer your question better. Just send me a private message. And what's up, Rain Final? Rain Final has Packers going 9-8 this year. That's a
fair prediction. Yeah. I don't hate that.
All right, let's get to the Vikings over under 8.5. I'm going to go over, but this one is just tough, man. And I do like the additions, like getting Will Fries, getting Kelly in that interior offensive line, but I don't necessarily think the offensive line was all that big an issue last year. I think a lot of that was Sam Darnold. I do think adding McCarthy to the mix could be a negative. That I guess here's my question. Now, this is lazy analysis by me, so just bear with me. But we saw that quarterback class last year. Caleb Williams was obviously the top dog. Jury's still out. He was very poor. But you look at Jaden Daniels, you look at Drake May, and you do wonder, like, how does McCarthy fit into this? For me, when I was looking at him, I felt like he was the worst of the bunch coming out, worse than Bo Nix as well. And I don't think I've seen anything to change my mind. Like we saw him against the Raiders once in preseason last year. And Mike, I'm just a little bit worried. He didn't make a lot of reads at Michigan. When they played a big game like against Ohio State, I remember him only throwing the ball 12 or 13 times in the game. Remember the national championship against Washington? Yep. How many times did he throw it? I mean, it's just like one read plays, and that's great. It's a different ball game in the NFL. I know he's got O'Connell. I know the Vikings have absolute dogs on offense at the skill positions. I'm going to go over, but it's because I think the Vikings defense is going to carry him here. But when you look at it, man, this Vikings defense does tailor off week 8, week 9. And I didn't like some of the subtractions in the secondary. I got to be honest, I'm worried about it. But this is Brian Flores' best front seven by far. Like, it's just a good front seven, considering what he had to work with the first 2 years.
I'm looking at it now. I mean, you add Jonathan Allen, you add Javon Hargrave. Like, those are two good, very good defensive ends. So,
yeah.
Yeah. Look, I'll be honest, and this might be kind of the lazy take. I'm going over, and I think it's a borderline money pick. Look, I just trust Kevin O'Connell at this point to find a way to win. I think this being 8.5 is a gift. I trust him. This was a guy who won 14 games with Sam Darnold, arguably one of the biggest busts of the last decade coming into the situation, and he made it work. So now you put J.J. McCarthy back in there. I trust Kevin O'Connell to find a way to make him look decent enough to win. Again, may not be the best take in the world. I had him going 11-6. That was my prediction. I also thought their offseason was like low-key pretty good.
Yeah.
And I thought Donovan Jackson was a pretty good pick in the draft. Added the offensive line. Like we already talked about, those two good defensive ends who are going to help in the trenches. Like, I thought they did fairly decent in the offseason. And I trust Kevin O'Connell to get this done. I don't have too much to add there, but the Vikings, to me, I know you may not feel this way because it's your own team, but to me, they're just an organization I can trust to get over 8.5.
Yeah, man. And it's a well-coached team.
Exactly,
like,
yeah.
That's where you're at. Like, we saw, just take O'Connell and Flores out of the situation. We saw what Sean Payton did last year. Okay. And that roster was completely decapitated. And we saw what was their win total going into last year, like 5.5.
Yeah, 5.
So, I mean, coaching in this league is a big deal. So, at least I'm so happy to have Kevin O'Connell at the helm. Let's get to Lions over under 10.5. I'm going to go over. A little bit worried about 2 new coordinators, but I do think people are forgetting how many injuries they had last year. The amount of injuries they had last year was absolutely disgusting defensively. And we have to remember that I felt like in the first 5-6 weeks, their defense might have been more impressive than their offense, as insane as that sounds. And with Aiden Hutchinson coming back, I think he's the favorite for defensive MVP. I don't have those expectations. I don't. I think when it gets to week 12 to week 12 to the playoffs, I think he's going to start taking over. But I don't have those expectations. But I think this defense is going to be very good. And that's what's going to pull me to this over 10.5. Worried about the offense. But, Mike, when you can run the ball down someone's throat, at what point do we need scheme when you have a top 5 offensive line that is physically dominant, that is in vogue, in rhythm, in continuity? We have had a lot of offensive line additions the last 2 off seasons because there's a lot of offensive lines that are struggling. And a lot of these offensive line additions, they're swing and miss more than hit, no matter how much money you spend. So that gives me confidence that the Lions are going to have a plus in that category, and that's going to stabilize them and bring them further. And you still have Dan Campbell, who's an absolute force of nature. The more I think about it, the more I want to make this a money pick. But let's be cautious. Let's not buy high, right? I mean,
yeah, I second pretty much everything you just said. I think the reason you can't bet it is because ultimately you're losing 2 top 5 coordinators in the NFL. And both of their replacements have never called plays before. So it's that makes it tough to bet. But like you said, this is a talented enough team that on paper should be able to get 11 wins. So I agree with you there. I especially, like you said, I don't know if any team has valued the trenches more than the Lions over the last couple of years. But yeah, they've certainly done pretty well in that department. Say hi to your wife for me. But yeah, they've certainly done very well in that department. And I have them going over as well. Not too confident in it though.
But their defense line is going to be very good.
Oh yeah, I think so too.
We were talking about Clowney the other day. This has to be a spot for him.
Yeah.
So I hope Detroit gets Clowney because we were talking about how good he was. Let's just segue into the Panthers, man.
You want to go there already?
Yeah, we're at the NFC South already. Panthers over under 6.5. I'm going to go over. But this is cautious. This is very cautious. But I do see the schedule, and I do think the Panthers can navigate it. And I also think the Panthers are going to have a very good run game. So that's what I'm excited about. And I also am looking at it from this perspective. The defense can't be worse. It really can't. That was one of the worst defenses in NFL history.
The worst defense in NFL history.
Oh, Jesus. It really reached that level.
We got it. We achieved it.
No, dude, and that's
in terms of points allowed, no team has done worse.
And that's
I'm very proud of that.
No, and that's playing like the Saints and Falcons twice. Although both offenses were good at times last year.
Yeah.
It's not like you were playing like the Vikings 2 times or the fucking like Rams. So that's the issue with me, man. The defense, but you added a lot of talent there. And I'm going to go back to what we were saying last year. Around the Giants game, I think around the Broncos game, you alerted us to say, you know, Bryce didn't look too bad. He actually is creeping close to average. And he did creep close to average once he got his opportunity to come back. And yes, I did fall for that Cowboys bet, but there was also times where he played good enough football that won us some money. And I do expect that to happen. I also like this wide receiving core, and I like Adam Thielen in the slot, and I think it brings some security. So, man, I think if they run the ball and they use play action, they should be good. Bryce Young obviously is a question. His mentality needs to be questioned, but at least he bounced back. So I'm going to go over 6.5. Fairly confident, although a little bit wobbly, because we know with Bryce Young, like I said, the mentality has to be questioned.
Yeah, I mean, I won't touch that point too much. I think he established himself pretty well in the second half of the year. I'll say this. If the Panthers played all of 2024 like they did week 10 on, they would have hit this over last year. So I definitely think they're going to go over this year. I am going 8-9. That's my record prediction for them, but I feel very confident about it. For one, I think they've closed the gap on these NFC South teams who have kind of whooped them. I think they're going to sweep the Saints, and I think they're going to split with the Falcons and Bucks. And the other point about the defense I want to make that you kind of alluded to, I think the biggest difference between this year and last year's team is I think this year's team is going to stop the run. And that was the Achilles heel of this defense. It seems like any time a team was struggling against the Panthers, which is crazy to think about, they would just start running the rock and fix all their problems. I don't think teams are going to be able to do that this year. They have a pretty manageable schedule. And I think the addition of Tedro McMillan on offense is going to take this receiving core to a new level, from below average to actually average, and help enable Bryce to be a top half of the league quarterback. So I really like this over. I don't see them making the playoffs right now or winning the NFC South, just because I think the Bucs are a little bit ahead of them still, and I think they play a lot of fringe playoff teams who kind of like are going to keep them out of there. But yeah, I really like this over.
Man,
Homer pick,
and
though.
It's the NFC South.
Yeah, it is the NFC South.
Like, these teams are very inconsistent. Let's be honest.
And let's go to the Falcons. Speaking of inconsistency.
Yeah, this is one I need to it's just because some books are given 7.5, and if you go over on that, it's a terrible price. Some are giving 8.5, and if you go under on that, it's a terrible price. So let's just go with 8.5 because I saw it more, and I'm going to go under. I think this is an 8-win team, and I think my biggest concern actually has nothing to do with the offense. My biggest concern is the defense. And I know they finally added some young defensive edge players. I just think it's too little too late. And they let this secondary decay. And I know they didn't have a good pass rush last year. We get it. Grady Jarrett's finally leaving. He's been one of the few bright spots on this defensive line. But I just don't think they're going to be able to cover anyone. And I haven't seen anything schematically from Raheem Morris that's going to help this defense. If anything, he completely subtracted from the defense last year. And I was shocked by some of the stuff we saw. And I was excited about them getting Raheem Morris. But obviously now with what's coming out about Belichick, we understand why Belichick did not get that job. I'm sure you're seeing that stuff, Mike. So it's just everything about Raheem Morris is really rubbing me the wrong way. And I have to understand that I was wrong about that hire. So maybe the offense gets better. Maybe the offense can do what we thought it would. But firstly, before we even get to Penix, this offensive line is also another unit that has decayed. Along with the secondary, it's decayed. They relied on Jesse Bates just going insane in the secondary. And this offensive line proved last year they're not as good going forward as they were before in terms of run blocking, and they can't pass block a lick. And I know Penix helping, boot action. You got good running backs. You got some good receivers. You got some good targets. So you're still relying on Kyle Pitts, which is a fucking issue. Yeah, man, I just think this offensive line is going to get figured out again this year, and they were figured out last year. And the offense coordinator who came over, I believe his name's Robinson, he came over from the Rams. He was figured out last year, like using pistol with Kirk Cousins. It was so sickening. And I know Kirk took a lot of the blame, and I get it. He wasn't mobile, and that's why he's in the pistol, because he wasn't able to hit the stretch plays, allegedly. I just felt like it was a lazy coaching job overall, and I don't think they're going to get away with it. I'm going to go under the 8.5.
Yeah, you know what? I'll tell you, I had this initially going over, but thinking about it now, I think I'm going to change my pick and go under. And something I just thought of, listen, number one, I don't think it's a guarantee that Michael Penix is this franchise quarterback that he's made out to be. But I know, but the way he's talked about and the way he's presented in the media, you would think he would. And the reason for that, look, he beat up on the Giants. He had a good showing in the clutch against the Commanders, and he quite frankly beat down on the Panthers practice squad. And listen, don't you think it's odd that they are not moving on from Kirk Cousins? Like, wouldn't you want to get $40 million off your books if you could? Like, that tells me.
Go on.
Like, that tells me they don't fully believe in Penix.
Because they also have to worry about their jobs, man.
Right.
Because, honestly, if Raheem Morris was fired last year, I would have been fine with it. I think maybe I have bigger expectations.
I think he should have been fired last year. I mean, the time management alone in that Commanders game, I thought was enough to give him the boot.
No, him and Callahan were the worst coaches last year. Yeah, and I know Eberflus and Antonio Pierce just being like, and Gerard Mayo just being absolutely just on kamikaze missions at times takes away the heat, and they're in quote unquote bigger markets. And I know you can hide in Atlanta a little bit. I know you can hide in Tennessee, but if I did a coaching power ranking, like, they would be my bottom two. So I think that's a concern, man. I also think the offensive coordinator, like I said, like, was a concern. And I'm not trying to like run cover for Penix if things go bad this year, or Kirk Cousins. I just think there's a lot of untapped potential on this team, and now it's decayed. So it's like, I think they really decayed. And did you see how long it took them to even just get some young defensive ends in here? Been waiting like 2.5, 3 fucking years for it to happen, and they finally get it. It just feels like too little, too late. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure this locker room's ready to fight. Also. And we don't know how to gauge that. Every year is different, but I'm not necessarily sure they're ready to fight. They're ready to sacrifice. And we saw them lose a lot of games the last 2, 3, 4 years that they had no business losing. And like, even if you look at that game against the Seahawks earlier in the year last year, it was some really just bad stuff.
I know they had some really bad home losses at home too, which should never happen in my opinion. Really something bad. Else too, like you said,
the big drop off from Arthur Smith leaving, even defensively. Like that defense should have been nowhere near as bad last year. They couldn't cover anyone.
And look, okay,
they were playing cover 4, and teams were throwing 3 or 4 deep balls a game.
Bro, and you know what's crazy? Falcons fans killed, and I mean killed, Arthur Smith for some of the stuff he pulled in Atlanta. But I thought what Raheem Morris did this last year was worse than anything that Arthur Smith did. No, Arthur Smith never had a 6-3 record and like a 3-game lead on the division and choked it away.
Yeah, and Raheem got some like good bounces too. Like remember that Tampa game? Like he got some good bounces, and they weren't able to create any bounces on their own.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. He should have been fired last year.
No, but Mike, like it really needs to be said because like this Atlanta team has had a ton of talent the last 3 years.
And dude, it seems like every offseason, every time I turn around, it feels like they're making the weirdest move you have ever seen. Whether it's trading up to take Penix in the draft when you have a $40 million quarterback, whether it's taking Jalen Walker at 15 and then trading next year's first round pick to trade back into the first round. Like this front office just seems very lost, if I have to say. I don't think they're fire happy enough, and I think they let too much go in that organization. And yeah, I mean, I wasn't too confident in this, but I kind of actually agree with your under now.
Yeah, Mike, and it's tough for me because I love the way this roster was constructed the last 4 years. But like when you got Dallas Turner, and you can draft him, and you saw what he did for the Vikings as a rookie, and you don't draft a defensive end, and you draft Penix. And listen, we can go through all these teams. Like we can look at the Panthers, hell, we can look at the Cardinals, we can look at the Bears, we can look at the Vikings, even the Packers. We actually like kind of understand the rationale,
the strategy
they make, whether we agree with it or not. Like even the Seahawks, like I didn't like the moves, but at least I see like what they're trying to do. I don't understand what Atlanta is doing.
Yeah, where are they going?
Like, and they're relying on someone like AJ Terrell. Like they milked the prime out of his career. Yeah. So like his career's over. I'm not saying his career's over, but his prime, his high act of being a top 8 corner in this league, that's over. And then you have no corner on the other side, and you're not going to have a pass rush.
Yeah, and look, I gotta say, we can stop hating on the Falcons. But like you said, I felt like this was the most talented team in the division from about 2019 to really about last year. And it just seems like, and it just seems like every year they just squandered their opportunity.
By far.
So,
all right, let's get to the Saints.
All right.
Money under.
I've been waiting years for this one.
How do you say slew or slow?
Oh, Shook. You're the quarterback. Yeah, Tyler Shook.
No one was correcting me. I remember on the draft they're saying Shook. But I guess to the guy who corrected me on the pronunciation on the spread video, doesn't really matter. And I don't, because I'm not trying to hate on him at all.
Yeah.
But I just think he's walking in to a complete disaster here. And I wonder, are they going to trade Chris Olave?
Well, can he even play?
Yeah, I guess like that's where I'm at. Like at a certain point, don't you kind of need to trade Chris Olave for him to play, for him to have like one last dance? Also, like that's a big contract, and you're not going to use him. I feel like the offensive line's poor, although it did show signs last year of some improvement with Kubiak. But I feel like the offensive line's poor, and I feel like this team, for a team that's going to be at the bottom of the NFL, I feel like it's a rather old team. And we have been wondering when the Saints were going to finally pull the plug and rebuild. And I guess this is the year. But like I said, there's a lot of money going out to old guys. I'm not even talking like paying veterans like Olave or Kamara. There's a lot of money going out to old guys who are well past it, like Honey Badger, Cam Jordan, still relying on Cam Jordan for some sort of pass rush and inspiration on the front seven. I think the defense is really bad. I feel like Dennis Allen worked some miracles the last 2 seasons. The secondary is very bad. And I just don't think this team's going to have much going offensively. And it is one of the worst. Actually, it is the worst quarterback situation I've seen since the late 90s, going to a competitive year. So I'm going under on the Saints 5.5, making them on.
Of course, my phone goes down right as it's my turn to talk.
No,
Okay. I'm gonna say one nice thing about the Saints, and then the rest of this is pretty much just gonna be hate for the rest of the video, like honest hate and critique. Listen, I like Tyler Shough. I think he made a lot of miracles happen at Louisville that he had no business making. It was very Joe Burrow-esque, so to say. And I think if this offensive line can actually stay healthy and give him a chance, I think he could generally be a good quarterback. Like, that is an honest take that I have. I think Tyler Shough could be decent if he is protected. Now, to get to the negatives, firstly, there was one hire throughout the NFL that just really pissed me off across the board. I know you had a drink when this man was fired, and for some reason the Saints brought him back. This move has not gotten the slander it deserves. The Saints hired, oh my gosh, I just blanked on his name. They hired Joe Staley as their defensive coordinator, Brandon Staley as their defensive coordinator. I don't know why they did that. I don't know who thought that was a good idea, but going from Dennis Allen to him is perhaps the worst switch I've ever seen from a team. Brandon Staley is going to destroy this defense. I mean, forget the talent. He is going to single-handedly make this a bottom 5 unit. I mean, this is a guy who tries to execute Vic Fangio's scheme and has no idea how to do it. His defenses can never stop the run, and that's something in the NFC South you have to do to win. His pass defense is probably one of the squishiest, most conservative defenses you will ever see. And he just sucks. Look, I'm going to be honest, he just sucks. Players don't like him. And I think by, especially an older roster, I think by week 5, week 6, this Saints defense that's very old with DeMario Davis, Cam Jordan, guys like that, they're going to be going, what the heck are we doing playing for this guy? This is not a coach I would want to play for. And so that alone is pushing me towards the under. Additionally, they have a pretty tough schedule for how bad they are. I'm going to be honest right now. I don't think they beat a single team in this division. Maybe they got to win over Atlanta, but it's certainly going to be hard for them to do that. So I have them going under. I feel very good about this. Kellen Moore is very much, I feel like, going to be a dead man walking kind of going into this. Sort of like how Brian Callahan was last year. But yeah, this is a disaster. This is a really bad situation.
I think it's one of the worst situations I've seen in quite some time.
Yeah. And if you want to talk strategy, sorry to cut you off, but we were just talking about the Falcons and how they seem to have no long-term vision. I don't believe the Saints fully committed to a rebuild until Derek Carr retired. And that should scare you as a Saints fan. You see that they brought in a lot of old veterans, a lot of guys on cheap deals. They're keeping a lot of older guys on cheap deals, like we just mentioned. And that, I don't see why you're doing that when it's clear and obvious that this roster needs to be rebuilt.
We have a Saints fan. He's saying Kellen Moore is loved by everybody in NOLA, you adolescent barf. This dude is literally farting. Go. His name is Go with an X. Man, it wasn't even a criticism of Kellen Moore. It's a very tough job, and it's a thankless job. And I'm sure I do wonder if the Saints fans no, it's a rebuild. I think that's kind of backing up Mike's point that there was any pushback to what was said. I think that's part of the problem. They need to tell everyone this is a rebuild. We're going to be shit, and have everyone get on board with it.
Yeah, and to your point, this is not Kellen Moore's fault.
It's not anything to do with Kellen Moore. He's just walking into a bad situation. And
the only thing he did wrong is hire Brandon Staley. That's it. That's the only thing he's done to piss me off so far. I wanted Kellen Moore a few years ago when the Panthers were looking for a head coach. I think he's decent. He's not the problem here. It's just the development of this roster and the defensive moves they made that really are going to push this under.
But Mike, this is the off season. Everything is rosy. There's rainbows. There's leprechauns. There's pots of gold. There's fifth rounders who are going to come in and be receivers for the Chargers. This is what the off season is. So, yeah, man. Let's get to the Bucs. over under 9.5. I'm going to go over but this is a tepid over. And I got to be honest, like I don't have a whole lot to say about the Bucs. I really don't. Obviously, offensive coordinator is a question, but offensive coordinator was a question going into last year. I feel like they made some improvements on defense, but I'm pretty worried about the defense. I'm pretty worried about Chris Godwin coming back in his health. But overall, man, it's pretty much the same team as last year. And I think the reason that pushes me to go over is because I think this is going to be a very good offensive line. And in a league where there's a lot of offensive lines in flux, I can vibe with the Bucs offensive line.
Yeah, I'm with you. I also had this going over. I will say, do not bet this. And I would highly encourage everyone to go take a look at the schedule because this is a pretty tough slate they got. They play the Texans on the road. They play the Eagles again. They play the Seahawks on the road, even though the Seahawks aren't that good. They play the Lions on the road. They just have a lot of tough outs, in my opinion. And like I was saying earlier, I don't think the Falcons and the Panthers are necessarily a free win anymore. And that should scare you. Yeah, and that should scare you as a Bucs fan, especially with a roster that's very much aging. I do think the Bucs still win this division. I think they've established enough of a culture to beat out two teams that really are just more lost than they are. And yeah, I have them going 10-7. Not a lot of science here and not a lot of confidence. I would not be surprised if they end up going like 7-10 or something.
I wouldn't be surprised even if they won like 12 games because their offense is just absolutely nasty.
Yeah,
when they get in rhythm. So the Bucs are a tough one, man.
Yeah, keep in mind too. This is quietly an older roster, so to say. Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Levante David, Vita Vea. These are all guys that are over 30. So just keep that in mind when you're betting the Bucs.
Yeah.
If you're betting the Bucs, that's not something we recommend. Do not bet the Bucs.
All right, let's get to the NFC East. We're over an hour, by the way.
Yeah, I know. We've slaughtered the chances of an early video.
We really went in on the Falcons, but I do feel like that's a situation that we needed to get into because it is interesting.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
All right, let's get to the Giants first. Giants over under 5.5. Money. I'm going under. And you talked about schedules, and let's pull out a little bit of data. The toughest three schedules are just on a completely different stratosphere than the rest of the schedule. Here we go, man. I just think the Giants are going to be an absolutely terrible team. I think you could even go under the 4.5 because, like you mentioned, the schedule is atrocious. You mentioned that on Instagram, and I'm losing my train of thought. But I do think the offensive line is still going to be an issue. And I think that is going to be the Achilles heel of this team, along with the quarterback situation. Anyways, lost a little bit of rhythm. There you go.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you. Look, I actually like a lot of what the Giants did this offseason. You look at their defense now, and it's a pretty, it's actually a decent unit on paper. Deontay Banks is a solid corner. They add Javon Holland. Their front seven is stacked. They have Dexter Lawrence, they have Brian Burns, they have Abdul Carter. They're going to be able to get after the passer. I like the select.
Banks, I mean, what a year last year in terms of just the volatility, him being benched 2 or 3 times. But you're right, he's a dog. But
he's a fighter.
Is he going to play well? I know, and the defense line is stacked, man. You're right.
Yeah, but like you said, and this is why there we go. I feel very bad for Brian Daboll and Joe Shane who are fighting for their jobs because I feel like they did very well this offseason, but I still feel like they're going to get the boot because of how bad the schedule is. It seems like every team they play is a fringe playoff team, and I'm not kidding about that. Their first 4 games, just to name a few, are the Commanders, Cowboys, Chiefs, and Chargers. That's just their first 4, and it gets worse from there. Like, this ship could be sank before it even gets a hole in it. Like, and that's a big problem for a team that really needs to win early for their coach's future to be secure. And if they lose Dayball, I don't see anyone else coming in there and making this team better. I don't see them doing any better than that. So look, I'm with you. It's a money pick, but like not for the reasons we typically talk about when we bet a team under. The Giants have done all the right things this offseason to me. It's just the schedule is such a you know what blocker that like it's going to keep them from doing anything this year.
Agree, man. And quarterback is going to be a huge issue. And that's been a huge issue for the Giants for a long time.
Yeah.
I actually feel like the quarterback play is going to be a downgrade. I think the weapons are going to be better. I think the offensive line should hold up. Like the offensive line got so bad last year when Andrew Thomas got hurt. Him being back is going to be huge. He was actually very good last year, I thought. But other than that, man, I just think the Giants are going to be bad again. And I like Dayball. I'm a Dayball supporter, but there's not much he can do here. And about Joe Schoen, I don't feel too bad about it. I don't. But you're right. Like they did have a good offseason. And I understand why people are optimistic, although I do think people got a little bit crazy about this Giants draft, though. I know it was good. And when you have 2 first-round picks, people get excited, but I do think some of the excitement was a little bit insane. Like it's really proof. Like we don't have like the bullets flying of real games. So people did get really excited. So
it was a pretty damn good draft. I can't even lie. Like I thought they did pretty well this draft.
All right, let's get to the Cowboys. I really like the over for the Cowboys.
Really?
Worried about what they're doing at offensive line. No, I'm worried about what they're doing at running back. Offensive line, you could have some concerns because there's a lot of young guys. Like you got Guyton, who he's going to have to play a huge role this year. At times he was good last year. At times he was poor. But yeah, man, I'm worried about the running back and running game, but they were able to consistently run the ball the last 6-7 weeks of the year. I also think the defense played pretty damn well last year, considering they had a lot of issues. They had a lot of people in transition. They had a lot of injuries. I think the Cowboys come back strong. And I also think Dak Prescott, I know you guys were hating on it, like the George Pickens, CD Lamb thing. But honestly, man, if you look at Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, I don't think CD Lamb is far off. I think his performance last year with the limited service and limited help he got was one of the better wide receiving seasons I've seen in quite some time. So I think you add George Pickens to that mix. I feel like the Cowboys finally get their explosion back. I'm going Cowboys, man, over. I'm not saying they're making a playoff push, but I really like the over here. Worried about Schottenheimer. And I do want to know, man, how much impact did Schottenheimer have in those last 8 game plans of the year last year? We don't know. Was it more Mike? Was it more Schottenheimer? I want to see.
Yeah, look, and that's the reason I'm not betting it. Like, what did Brian Schottenheimer do to earn this job?
Have family and be the Seahawks offensive coordinator for a few years.
Yeah, exactly. You know the last coach who sounds like that to me? Mike Shula. And Mike Shula was one of the worst offensive coaches I've ever seen. I see your point, though, to be fair. Like, I do think this team is talented enough to hit the over. I just don't believe in the head coach.
Fair enough. And that's really and there are questions on defense. But right. I do think this defense is going to be pretty good. Like, I do like their defensive front in terms of versatility. I don't think they're going to be good stopping the run, but maybe that's something Zimmer can scheme up. Is Zimmer still there? I didn't even check on that. Sorry about that. I don't want to assume he's still there.
I also really like the Devon Ezraki pick. Give Micah Parsons someone to run with.
Well, yeah, man, and that's one thing we have to be honest about the Cowboys. And Mike Zimmer's still there. That's one thing we have to be honest about the Cowboys. Like, I know everyone likes to dunk on them. I know they're not well ran, but let's be honest, man. This team has drafted well throughout the years. Like, even
which is surprising too, because Jerry Jones is the GM.
Exactly.
Like that should not happen with Jerry Jones running the show.
No, they have really good scouts. Like, yeah. I mean, for like the Jonathan Mingo trade last year, like I said, it's like easy to dunk on the Cowboys, and there's never ending material, and it's going to keep coming. And I'm not saying it's going to be pretty, but 7.5 is an awful low number. And I do think Dak Prescott is, dude, like, I know, like, I get it, but Dak Prescott isn't that bad. And it's the regular season. It's not like we're picking him every week in a home playoff game. Okay. Like, this is the regular season, guys. Commanders over under 9.5. I probably should be going under here, but I'm going to go over. Because you still have Cliff, who I felt like was a top 5 offensive mind last year in terms of play calling, keeping his team on schedule. I mean, there was a little bit of lull in the year. What was it? Between maybe week 12, week 15, where there just wasn't a lot in their bag and their offense really struggled and stagnated. But other than that, I felt like Cliff Kingsbury was phenomenal. Jaden Daniels was phenomenal. From a team spirit point of view, did anyone have better team spirit and fight than the Commanders? That's one thing when we talked about the Giants that maybe I'm worried about. They quit. I mean, really, they kind of quit before the Panthers gave them the 1-2 knockout, okay? But the Giants really got knocked out last year from a mentality standpoint. I can't see that happening from the Commanders, even if they start really poor, like 2-5, 2-6. I still think they're going to come, and I still think they're going to have moments in the year. So I'm going to go over. Worried about the defense talent. I know you lose someone like Jeremy Chin, and I know he's not like a great player or even someone you would say above average player, but the Commanders are a team that they don't have a lot on defense already. And that's still the big issue of this team. Can this defense be consistent? Can this defense get stops? And can this offense continue to help the defense? People forget that this offense last year was an absolute just behemoth on fourth down conversions. And they were fourth down conversions a little bit different than Detroit, where Detroit just pounding it up the middle and completely manhandling you. A lot of these fourth down conversions for the Commanders were finesse, 4th and 3s, keeping their defense on the field and helping them control the pace and flow of the game. So I'm going to go over 9.5, but very, very cautious on this over.
Yeah, this is definitely a team I could see kind of being like this year's Houston Texans from last year, like a team that we expect to kind of take the next step and ends up like taking a major step back. This is another team whose offseason strategy I completely disagreed with. I mean, we saw in the NFC Championship game this team just get run over, and even in the first 2 rounds prior to that, this is not a defense that played well. Like, I don't see why they didn't put more resources into investing in it. And really all they did was bring back Bobby Wagner. Like, I just don't see how this defense has improved a whole lot. And that's the biggest Achilles heel. And listen, I don't like saying this very often, but let's be real. Like, the Commanders caught a good amount of breaks last year. They hit a miracle against Chicago. Jalen Hurts got hurt against them. That kind of enabled them to win against the Eagles. They beat the Saints by 1 point. That alone should tell you enough. And they obviously lost to the Cowboys, but they struggled against Dallas last year. Like, I just felt like they kept it very close against a lot of mediocre to bad teams. And then kind of just Jalen Daniels just took over once the playoffs came around. So I have it going over. I do think 9.5 is very low, but don't be surprised if this is a team that takes a major step back in 2025.
And I can't say I like the Debo. I don't know, man. We talked about Debo Samuel earlier in the video. I can't say I'm thrilled about that. Like, I would have preferred a Thielen for this offense, to be honest.
Yeah, a route runner.
or a legit deep threat, because Terry, he has his limits in terms of creating space at this point and getting over the top of defenses. I would have preferred a Thielen, to be completely honest. Of course, you would have liked Devontae Adams, but I'm a little bit worried about Deebo Samuel. I'm not sure that's like the big shakeup they needed. Offensive line also overachieved last year, so I'm curious to see. You add Laramie Tunsil, like I think that will help a lot. But I mean, there was a reason why the Texans' offensive line struggled and they traded their only good offensive lineman. Laramie Tunsil is frustrating. And the Commanders played really good situational football last year, which is a credit to them, but also some of it is luck. I'm not saying it's luck, not having false start after false start, but Laramie Tunsil was just it was absolutely atrocious the first 8 weeks of the year in terms of pre-snap penalties and penalties on early downs. It was really, really fucking frustrating. So if anyone wants to know why the Texans got rid of him, it was just those first 8 weeks, which was causing me to pull my hair out. Let's get to the Eagles. Last team in this list. You have to go over the 11.5, right?
Well, I mean, so I do, but like analytically, I'm not gonna lie. I really want to go under here. For one,
no, Mike, I get you. It's just I do think maybe the depth is a little bit poor compared to other years, but if you look at their starting 11, they're starting 11 on both sides of the line of scrimmage. Like man.
I'm with you. I think this is easily the most talented team in the NFL. But here are my points. Firstly, I don't think Saquon Barkley is running for 2,000 yards again. And I just feel like they are a bad offensive coordinator, which I don't think is out of the loop, and a Saquon Barkley injury away from like their offense taking a major step back. And that's my big concern. They also had a lot of defensive turnover this offseason. I still think their defense is going to be like phenomenal under Vic Fangio, but it still is something to note. I have them going over 11.5 is really low for them, in my opinion. Like, I think it should be higher. I mean, this was arguably one of the best teams we've seen this century. So the fact that it's 11.5 is really low for me. But I see the thinking in that this could go under.
Yeah, and the defensive line would be like my only question, because you lose a lot of good players on that defensive line. But then again, I still think it's going to be better than most teams in this league. You could still say it's a top 5 defensive line. I mean, you could still say that. And they seem to know how to get rid of people. Like, we forgot to mention like Hassan Riddick for the Buccaneers. Like, can we even be excited about that? I mean, like, just giving an example, like, I don't even know if I can be excited about Hassan Riddick for the Buccaneers.
No,
it's just the Eagles have something special going on there. And, yeah, man, and I guess here's something I would like to offer. I felt like Jalen Hurts played poor last year in terms of his potential. If he plays better, I mean, this team is just going to be completely unstoppable, because there was times last year where he was just really, really poor and really out of rhythm. But like you said, it could be, you remember the year they had Johnson at offensive coordinator, and it was just a complete disaster. And then everyone felt like Jalen Hurts hated Sirianni. I mean, that could be what blows it up. But that would be
even that year, I felt like he was better than he was last year before his injury. Keep in mind, let's just say, save for fun, like, if the Eagles lose to Washington, if they lose to the Packers, if they lose to the Rams in the playoffs, the main headline coming out of that game is going to be Jalen Hurts sold the Eagles, which would have been a fact, because he was not good in either of those games. And he happened to play the best game of his life in the Super Bowl. Now, obviously, I believe Jalen Hurts, like, that's his potential. That's what he can do. He's shown that multiple times now. Still a very good quarterback. Definitely has that clutch gene but like I think the consistency is not always there. Granted, he was injured for those first couple games as well, so maybe that was a part of it. But to your point, I just don't feel like he was right all last year for whatever reason. And I felt like I don't want to say they got lucky, but they definitely got a lot. They got a lot of work and a lot going their way with Saquon having the year he did.
Agree, Mike. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you share the videos. Best gambling show on the internet. AFC will be coming next week.